And behind us, I think one of the most special parts of Indiegraf is definitely our people. We were created in 2020 by two sisters, journalists that wanted to make sure that the news were accessible and fair, and they were like a platform that would support their growth fairly. And this is a few of our directors. And the last time we all actually met each other in person, I haven't met a few of them in Chicago. That's where I met Laura in person too. Another thing we wanted to talk to you about before we get started with the AI session, because that's where you guys are all here from, is I wanted to share great news for us and Indiegraph. We launched last week a Tech for Journalism program. This program is an initiative that it's being made possible by the Knight Foundation. They had an huge investment in us to help independent media get access to our technology platform. This is a multi-year program where publishers that do get into our program get 70% discount on our technology products, 50% discount the first year. And the second year, they will continue to get 50% discount on our technology and 50% discount on our Indiegraph expert services. By the year three, our hope is that publishers that join us get to have a revenue line that will help them pay for their technology services. And this way, we'll continue to, our goal is to continue to significantly reduce our rates, and graduate is designed to support this growth journey. So a couple of things to be mindful if you are interested in applying for this program is that you need to be based in the US. You need to operate as a nonprofit, or if you're for profit, you need to be serving an underserved area or community. You need to make sure that you're producing original local content. It can be any type of content, just needs to be original, and the capacity of collaboration. So applications needs to demonstrate that there is leadership commitment and ability to commit consistently staff time to the project. Okay, so if there's anyone interested, you will get I think the link is right here in our chat. You can go to our website and anywhere. Now, Laura, sorry, you can go to the next slide now. Thank you. I will let now Laura and Lynn take the lead and introduce themselves. But yeah, I'm still here. I'll be looking at your questions to help respond. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Valeria. So I'm Laura Davis. I am the entrepreneur in residence for AI at Indiegraf currently. I came to that role when Indiegraf acquired a company I used to run called StyleBot, which was a newsroom style guide that I wrote in my role as a professor at USC Annenberg, where I still teach, that you could access across platforms, and that's being incorporated into Indiegraf's OS. And I've been working with Lynn for many years, so I'm really excited to be here with her, and I'll let her talk about her work.
Hi, everyone. I'm Lynn Walsh, the Assistant Director at Trusting News. Trusting News is a nonprofit journalism support organization. We try to, as the name implies, help journalists build trust with their communities. And primarily how we do that is we look to consumers to see why they are distrusting in news. We try to come up with solutions to what they say those problems are. We then recruit newsrooms to test those solutions. And then if they are working, we share best practices. I've been leading the AI work that we've been focusing on for the last now 3 years. And actually, we just published brand new research today. I'll be putting a link in there about how AI literacy helps to build trust. But today, I'm going to be talking primarily about why transparency around your AI use is just really necessary according to the public. And so Laura and I will go through and talk about how we can help you get on the record and put those guidelines out to the public with an AI use policy. And Laura, do we want to talk about here how the rest of the session will go?
Yep.
Yeah, so first we're going to talk about research on AI and audience trust. Then we're going to also share some newsroom examples of what these look like, what policies look like, and what the disclosures look like. And then we're going to actually select someone. So if you don't have an AI use policy currently, and you would like to have one after leaving this session, please be ready to volunteer because we'll walk you through how to create one. And then we'll also go through other ready-to-use templates and a Q&A.
So the reason Lynn and I care so much about this and that we want to do this session is partly because there's a lot of reasons we care, to be honest with you, but part of the big reason is because when we look at the aggregate data, we see that whether you're using AI or not, whatever you're doing with it, your audience probably assumes that you are. So majority of people Reuters surveyed in 6 countries believe that journalists use AI always or often. And then a study from the University of Minnesota found that more than a third of Americans use AI to write, more than a third of Americans believe journalists use AI to write stories at least sometimes, which, I think is one of not high on the list of the way many journalists are using AI right now. And only 8% of those people think that this happens never. So there's this big belief out there among audiences, at least like I said, in the aggregate, that journalists are using AI, and Trusting News' research, which Lynn is going to dive into, found that they are overwhelmingly demanding, or not, well, demanding, I don't know if that's too strong of a word, but they want disclosure from journalists. They want guidelines and disclosures from journalists around it. So I'll let Lynn dig into that.
Yes. So as I mentioned, for the last 3 years at Trusting News, we've been trying to basically answer the question around how can journalists use AI and not lose trust and even possibly maybe build trust. And so one of the first things that we did is we recruited newsrooms to ask their news consumers, hey, if we use AI, what do you expect from us? How comfortable are you with this? What types of content are you comfortable with us using AI for? And so what we found first and foremost is that one, people do, and Laura, I don't think it's too strong to say demand, they demand transparency. We are finding it's 94% in the one survey. We did a follow-up survey with the local media association. That percentage went up to 98% last year. The other thing that we're finding when it comes to transparency is they do expect journalists to have guardrails. So that's where these AI use policies come in. You also see from this graph here, there's still a third of the audience that is pretty uncomfortable with journalists using AI. But most of the audience is saying, it's okay if you use it, but we want to know that you have policies. We want to know that you have those ethical guidelines. I mentioned we just released new research. We asked this question again. So this is from last fall, this question. We asked the question this spring, that percentage of people who expect journalists to have those clear ethical guidelines went up to 72%, so up 10 percentage points. But the percentage that said journalists should never went down to 20. So you kind of see this changing along the way, but the clear message is have that AI use policy, those guidelines in place.
Whoops, sorry.
Yeah, and so this is research from that local media association research that we did last fall. And when we said which of the following, the question was, which of the following would help build trust when AI is used in journalism, you can see to the top 2 things are, well, 3 things really are all about transparency. But that second one that I highlighted there is they want that policy.
And then there was another study that came out recently that surveyed, I think, around 2,000 people in Chile, and it had them compare like Newsroom A, Newsroom B, and how they were dealing with AI and how they were disclosing it. And the 2 things that they found overwhelmingly that increased the participants' view of credibility of the news organization were having human oversight and disclosure of use. And the next slide you'll see, this slide really shows how those numbers break down. I think this is a good use of a graphic here. The most important things when it comes to how they're assessing the credibility of a news outlet is human review and disclosure, like I was saying. So now we're going to go over some real examples from newsrooms. And you're going to need, for AI disclosures, you're going to need 2 different things, and we're going to give you all the tools for that today. So a general disclosure on your website, as well as letting people know when specifically you used it, which is a story level disclosure.
And so in our research, as we kind of were again, starting with what do consumers need to feel comfortable with this AI use? And the reason that I do use the word comfortable is because if you all are working so hard on this news content, producing ethical, accurate, responsible information, right? Which I know if you're here, that's what you're doing. You don't want that to be ruined by the audience, by your community member finding out that AI was used. And so we're trying to figure out how we can still let them trust and believe your content, even though you're using AI, because there are good reasons to potentially use AI and ways to use it responsibly. And so when we dug into the research a little bit deeper, what we learned is that people they want that AI use disclosed, right? So they want you to have that policy. They also want to see a disclosure when it's used. So that's where those in-story disclosures come in. And specifically, what they want to know is they want to know why. Why are you deciding to use AI? They also want to understand how are you still making sure that by using AI, you're being ethical and accurate. And most importantly, they really want to know that a human was still involved. For the most part, almost across the board, people are just not comfortable with content being solely created by AI and no human touching it or seeing the content or verifying it before it goes live. So that human in the loop, as the term has kind of been become known for, is very, very important.
So one policy that this is one of the Indiegraf publishers, it's Energetic City, and they have a policy on their website. I'll show you how you access it in a couple slides, but it's easy to access is the TLDR of that. And so they start with a little statement about AI generally. They go right into unacceptable use, and then they list specifically acceptable use of AI. And you can see the link here to if you want to go and look at the policy in more depth. It's kind of long, I realize. So they outline specific cases. And what we particularly like about this is, like I was saying, it's easy to find. So you can see here on the About Us page, they have a section just for an AI policy. You don't necessarily need this. Like, we are very much taking this like perfect is the enemy of good approach here, because we think that this is urgent for newsrooms to talk about AI to their audience. So we want you to feel like getting a policy on your website is accessible. So you could put it in a bigger about page or some page you already have existing on your website. But this one is in particular, it's easy to find right in the About Us from the menu on the home page. It's clearly labeled AI policy. I like that it starts out with acknowledging the risks of using AI, and it clearly outlines the use cases, like I was saying, and then it notes the human oversight and responsibility. So if you look, I don't know if people can see my mouse here, but I'm mousing over the bottom where it says retains ultimate accountability for anything published. I think that's a really important element.
And then this is another example. This is from a newsroom that was part of one of the research cohorts that we did, Nucleo. They are based in Brazil. They use AI quite often. They are a newsroom that has leaned into it early. They use it to sometimes actually generate images. I would say, kind of on a scale of where newsrooms are using it, they definitely are one of the newsrooms using it more often than most. And so, as Laura was talking about, I just want to emphasize the point that she made. You know, I think what's holding up a lot of newsrooms from getting these policies out there is that we are trying to make them perfect. Does it have everything it needs to have? And again, from a trust standpoint, from a believe in your content standpoint, keeping people believing your content, even though you're using AI, you just need to get something out there. And it does not have to answer every single question that your news consumers may have right away. One thing that we really like is approaching it like Nucleo does as an FAQ. So what we see here, Laura, if we go to the next slide, is Nucleo basically answers three questions. And this is on a page that is dedicated to just talking about AI. But they have a short intro at the top that talks about why they're using it. And they also ask for feedback. But then they just say, we may. Here's what we may do with AI. Very basic question to answer. And then they answer, Laura, next slide, they say what we will never. So again, listing out how they will never. And then the third question they answer is basically what they can then promise the user, that they will be transparent. And so this type of FAQ kind of format, it's easy to read. it answers those three main questions that really that's what people are the most concerned about. And then the other great thing about kind of taking an FAQ approach is if people have other questions, or maybe people keep saying, well, what about the environmental impact? Have you thought about that? You can add that to this page. This page can be a living document, right? It can be something that then is updated as you think that it's appropriate to add more questions and more answers. But again, I do like this kind of simple approach. And again, just to emphasize Laura's point there, don't let perfection stop you from just getting something out there that's answering these main questions. You can always improve it and go deeper as time goes on. And this is an example. So those were the two examples Laura and I just went over were those AI use policies. So that's something that you can link to, you can share. Let's say you get a comment or an email. Hey, do you guys use AI? Oh, actually, we do. Here's how we use it. Here's a link to our policy. You can kind of share that and make it be kind of evergreen social content or evergreen content in a newsletter every once in a while, right? But most people may not stumble upon that policy or see it. So when you are using AI in a story, it is also important to have that disclosure on the story itself. So within the content, whether that's video, that's audio, that's text. We also worked with newsrooms to do that. And this is an example from USA Today. And at the bottom of the story, they have this disclosure saying that it was created by Janice, who is a reporter, but with the assistance of artificial intelligence. Journalists were involved in every step of the information gathering, review, editing, and publishing process. That's that human in the loop, right? And then they'd say to learn more, go check out basically that's a link to their AI use policy. So this is a really good example answering those questions of what people say that they want to know when you're using AI.
And sorry, excuse me. I think we made this apparent when we were advertising this webinar, but like we think that it's also important, sorry, for even if you're not using AI, to say that as well. Because, going back to the first slide, I was talking about, people are assuming you're doing it one way or the other. So if you're not, we think there's an incredible value to really emphasizing that you are human produced from start to finish. Again, Lynn was pointing to some of the research showing the skepticism around AI use in journalism. And so if you're not doing it, just say it. We think there's a huge value in that. And Monse just linked in the chat. You can go online right now and do some fill in the blanks on an interactive template we have available, and go ahead and fill in the template, and you can export a policy and have something that's ready to put on your site. And we'll go over a little bit about kind of no AI strategies and policies as we get into the templates.
And just an example of, we did have one newsroom in one of our cohorts. So again, we've had 3 cohorts now, so probably 30 to 40 newsrooms who have participated. And one of the newsrooms, BNN, which they're a local newsroom, primarily serving Indigenous communities in Oklahoma, they do not use AI in their content, in their news content. And so they have a policy kind of flagging that on their policy page, saying that BNN does not currently use AI in news production. We will let you know if and when that changes. They say we have no current plans to use AI to produce reporting, though they are exploring the potential of AI use for story summaries. And so again, very specific. I know the person who developed this was very thoughtful and just wanted to make sure, because of the feedback they're hearing from their community about the negative feelings about AI and how that could impact specifically who they serve, she wanted to make sure to get on the record that, one, they're being thoughtful about this, they have thought about it, which that's kind of something else that, as Laura was talking about, if you're not using AI, one reason to get that policy out there is to show that you obviously know this technology is out there and you've made a decision purposefully to not use it. So get credit for that, get credit for that thoughtfulness. That helps build trust and build that confidence in your news organization.
All right, so we are going to get started with an interactive the interactive portion of the workshop.
Yes.
So, Lynn,
So
do you want to talk about the, sorry, excuse me, the worksheet?
yes. Okay. So, like I said, at Trusting News, we've been trying to figure out and news consumers, what do they want, and then help news organizations deliver that. And so, one thing we have done is based on that research, we've developed, which we will share later on, fill in the blank language. But we also have this worksheet specifically developed for helping you create an AI use policy that, again, is going to answer really those three main questions. Are you using AI? If so, how? How are you not going to use AI? And what can you promise the audience? And so I'm going to go through the worksheet quickly and answer or show you what the questions are. But as I'm doing that, if you're someone who does not have an AI use policy and would like to leave here today with everything to have one, please be thinking of possibly volunteering because we'll go through and fill this out together so you can leave and have one, which would be awesome. Like, talk about a great 60 minutes spent. So I'm going to go through the questions, but again, please be thinking about if you want to be our volunteer. So again, I talked about how we really are designing this to make it easy and maybe not have the formality of a policy, to make this something that's easier for your newsroom to do. So the first part of this worksheet, we ask you to reflect on what you've heard from your audience. The reason we do that is because we do believe that this policy should be something that is written for your audience. It's not written in kind of that very formal journalism jargon, right? This is something that is written to help the news consumers, your public, understand how you use AI. And so we ask you first to reflect on what you're hearing from your audience. Then we ask you to think very carefully about how you're using AI and how you're thinking about it. And so
I
that's kind
think
of the
Catherine,
first part is,
I'm sorry, Elaine. I was just gonna say, I think Catherine would like to be our volunteer from the El Colectivo.
oh, perfect. That's awesome. Okay. It's Catherine, you said?
Yes, her name's Catherine Stanley.
Yes. Okay, great, Catherine. Well, I'll ask you to unmute just in a moment. I just want to go over these questions again. So first, the worksheet covers reflect on audience questions you're receiving. Then we ask you to think kind of broadly about why are you experimenting with AI, and then get into clarifying the use. How are you using AI? When are we not using it? And then that promise to the audience. So if you want to unmute yourself and tell us first, I guess, a little bit about your newsroom, that would be helpful. And then we'll start filling this policy out. And thanks for volunteering.
Sure, thank you. This is great. Can you hear me okay?
We can, yes.
All right. Well, El Colectivo 506 is a national solutions journalism media organization in Costa Rica, and we also have a solutions journalism fund for Latin America. So we also fund and publish stories throughout the region. We are bilingual, English, Spanish. So, and that is very relevant to our use of AI because we have to translate everything, and that's been kind of one of our first and most consistent uses of AI over the years. Questions from our users and comments, I would have to say,
Yes.
I don't think I've heard any. We've talked a lot about it among ourselves. But I don't think we've received any direct questions from people about AI.
Oh, interesting. Okay. And not
And
even maybe like, wonder if any reporters or anything have been passing. That might be a question just to bring back to your newsroom. Like if anyone just as they've been out in the field, or maybe even any comments on social.
Our status with our reporters is that we have told them that, and we're working almost, always with freelance reporters, so we don't have a fixed newsroom staff. So we say that they have to disclose any use of AI to us during the production process. And
Awesome.
so far, we have not had anyone do that. And then I should also mention we actually created a chat bot to help journalists improve their solutions journalism pitches. And so when we have calls for proposals, we now say not only, we want you to disclose your use of AI for the proposal, but also please use this bot and tell us how it helps you. So we kind of shifted in that
Very
way
cool.
from, because we were starting to get pitches that were very clearly AI drafted. So we kind of channeled it in that way and said, you can use AI, but try this bot because that one we know the quality of it and we can, you know, it provides a
Yeah.
channel for the AI. So we're just not getting ChatGPT drafted pitches, which was starting to happen.
Oh, wow. Well, we'll talk about that more than when we talk about how we're using AI. So we'll skip now since you haven't gotten any feedback to the define your purpose. So this question is meant
Hmm.
to really kind of think about like kind of holistically, like why is your newsroom even kind of considering AI? What do you think it can help you do? And if you kind of talk, I'm going to take notes.
I think the two main things are, again, we have to translate everything usually to English. Occasionally we're translating something into Spanish. And so that, ways we can save time with that, improve our translations, do things like have our podcast episodes have captions, all those functionalities that AI can help with are very important to us. And then I think the other big thing we're interested in is um, since we do in-depth solutions journalism, it tends to be quite extensive. So summarizing is interesting to us. Having ways that we can have briefer, whether it's for social media or for a podcast summary or just having briefer versions of the stories could be very interesting and helpful for us. And then in research, I mean, of course, solutions journalism requires a lot of research, so there are many functionalities there that
Okay.
that could be
And
helpful.
then, yeah, and you named some of, so that's kind of broadly, but I know you've named some of this. How are we using AI now specifically? So we have translation, summarizing. I also think, I don't know if you mentioned or have thought about mentioning the bot, but really that's kind of idea generation, right? Sort of, or maybe maybe not idea
Yeah,
generation, but like
really what the
how would
what the
you describe
bot
that?
does is yeah, it's a solutions journalism chatbot. And so really what it does is the prompts were very specific so that it doesn't create ideas or draft things for you. Hi, Crystal. I'll put it in the chat. It's called Loose Lab, looselab.org. And so what the bot does is it helps the journalist see whether their idea um, is a good fit for the four pillars of solutions journalism: um, response, evidence, insights, and limitations. So it asks questions and pushes the journalist to think through how could those four pillars apply to my idea.
So maybe it's like a pitch. Maybe story framing, maybe.
Yes.
That might be. It helps with story framing. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So we have translation, the summarizing, research. Is there anything else specifically? Do you do image generation at all? Any kind of headline writing?
We have done, my partner is our graphic editor, Monica, and she is the expert on that, but she has done some, I think, image generation for more for like preliminary things, like if we're trying to think through what a design element could look like. Not so much for things that we're publishing, and certainly not for anything photographic. Um, I think that I, as a writer, and she, as a photographer, are very, that's where we really want to have a hard line about actual writing under a byline or photographs. I think we would want to keep it out of there.
Absolutely. And so when you think about your workflow, because this is an important thing that people care about, like when are you using the AI? Is it in like the reporting process, the editing process, the production? Like how would you, it sounds like a lot, some of this is more kind of like the pre-reporting process with the research. Um, some of it is production, I guess, from the translation standpoint, right?
Yeah,
And
and
the
transcription
different
also,
formats.
transcription,
Yeah.
translation and transcription.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So you
Um,
have kind of a little bit of this kind of throughout actually the process. What about editing? Are you using it in the editing process?
No,
Okay.
I'm resistant there.
Okay. Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, that's why this is good because it's good to have it's good to talk and think about like what are we okay with, what are we not okay with, and kind of explaining why. And that's what people are interested in. So when
Yeah.
are you not using AI? So not in the editing process.
Yeah. Um,
You said not for like realistic images, really, and really not for images at
Not
all.
for image. Yeah, I would say not for images. It's really been more for like a mock-up to show a designer
Hmm.
what we're trying to achieve. Oh, someone asked spell check. Sure, yeah, spell check. I guess we work in Google
Okay.
Docs, so like the little red lines that appear underneath that help alert
Right.
us to errors, sure. And not for any writing. Um, and
Okay.
I think for right now, that's what's really important, at least to me, is that if there's a byline on a piece, or I would really like people to know that when they're reading pieces on our site, those are written by humans. But as I said, summaries and translation, that it's very useful for us in those ways. So I think that's where we need to really clarify.
Yeah. And so that kind of gets your comment you just made. I typed it here. We want people to know content is written by humans. Like, what are some things that you can promise your community when it comes to your use of AI? Like, what would be things you're ready to say? If we are using AI, here's what we can promise you.
I think that our stories are written by humans, and that like I would have
Yeah.
liked to
So you're
say
always had that human in
every
the loop.
word you read on our site comes from a human. But then again, if we start having some translations at the top of the story, or like summaries of the shorter forms of some of the stories, then it gets a little blurrier. Certainly
Did you
always
say
have
always
human
have
review.
human review? Okay. You're so yeah, you always have human review. You're never just publishing what AI gives you. Um,
Well, and I think maybe
could
one way we could
okay.
phrase it is that our stories, every story on our site is written by a human. It's not written by AI. I think that is fair for at this time, we can say that, and I
Mhm.
don't think we have any plans to shift that. And then the other thing I
Okay.
think we can
Now,
say is that if AI is used, if there's an exception to that, it will be flagged where it occurs. So, for example, I could imagine we have a really in-depth investigation of something that involves a lot of documents, and I could imagine us saying in a story, we fed all these, political platforms through this tool to find what were the most mentioned, proposals, and here's what it said. But we would in that story, we would be flagging it right there for you. So I think that's a commitment we can
right.
make to the reader.
Yeah, so I just said basically, if AI is used, we will disclose it to you where it is used. And then
Yeah.
if you publish what comes out of this worksheet, you can also say, we have guardrails in place that about our use of AI.
Yeah. And I really like the idea, the example you showed from USA Today, where there was some use in the story and then they explained it and they had the link to the longer policy. Because especially since we work with so many freelance journalists, like a lot of readers won't um, necessarily read that long policy, but the longer policy with the we may and we will never, that's really important for us to show our own journalists so that they have clarity on what we expect from them.
Right. Absolutely. And so we have if this is published, we're going to have guardrails in place about our use of AI, that ensure our work is accurate, ethical. Something like that would be a good thing, I think, to
Hmm.
say.
Hmm. Yeah.
And then this last question that we kind of already answered, how do you ensure accuracy when using AI? And that's going to be that human in the loop always.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've answered all the questions. Oh, and will you be transparent? Yes, we talked about yes, you will disclose. So now the idea is that you would draft this, and we're a little short on time, but you would basically take those answers to what we just went through. And what I would recommend, how this worksheet is really designed, is for that FAQ style. So you'd have a short intro just about, and here I'm just going to draft here at the bottom, um, like a short intro about why exploring use of AI. I know you mentioned um, allows more formats for your users.
Yep.
And then, so that would be one thing you would expand on. And then talk about here's how we may use AI. Here's how we'll never use AI. And what we can promise you, or something like that, when we use AI.
Okay. I have a question. Have you seen media organizations in their policies, and this might have been in the ones you shared and I didn't notice it, talk about the environmental ethics of this as part of their reasoning
So
or
yes, Pointer has a very in-depth guide to help people create an AI use policy. It is really good. It just is, and I can find a link and put it in here. It's a very good policy. Oh, thanks, Laura, for pulling it up. But you can tell what I have found is that it can be intimidating for newsrooms because there's a lot of questions to answer. But they do have, I believe there is toward the bottom, something on environment that they added. See, where they have some sample language disclosure. Let's see if they. I thought there was something on environment there. Oh yeah, there we go.
there it
Environmental
is.
impact. So they have some sample language there. Um, I have to look. I have not off the top of my head am I remembering someone who has one that is kind of published. I don't know, Laura, if you off the top of your head know of one. I know it's something I've been looking for. Laura, sorry, I was asking you. I don't know if you know of any policies that have the environmental thing specifically mentioned around use of
Sorry,
AI.
I was just pulling up Energetic Cities policy to see if
Oh,
they actually, because
perfect.
they do, like I said, they do address some concerns, but it doesn't, it says, like they say, they talk about the work serving their community, but they don't mention the environment specifically. But I know that is a concern for some newsrooms is how, data centers, not just like a theoretical or not theoretical, but like far away impact of the environmental impacts. But some communities, this is really the data centers and that stuff is really affecting them. So I know there's broad concerns around that, and I think Pointer has some language here that you can adapt if you want to.
Excellent. Thank you.
Yeah. And the last thing I just would say about the environmental thing and with these policies in general is, again, when you think of and hear the term policy, sometimes I think everyone jumps to the formality of it. And what we are really trying to encourage newsrooms to think about it is that it doesn't have to have that formal aspect. It can be something that is that living document and that you update, right? So with the environment, just kind of flagging that you have thought about this, you've had conversations, and this is why you thought about it, and maybe say something like, "Here's how we are trying to limit our use to limit the impact," or "Here is also our commitment. We're also trying to find more about in our reporting to learn more about the impact and share that with you so we can better understand it." There are ways to talk about it without necessarily maybe having a full answer, and I think people will appreciate if you're saying, this is something we're still struggling with internally and we welcome your feedback on how you're thinking about this too.
Thank you.
Sorry, Monse just put this in the chat, so I'm pulling up this one. That does mention this. So we can, and these links are in the chat, so you can definitely check them out for yourself as well. Thank you, Monse.
Yeah, and Catherine, I'm gonna send this link to you so you can use this to uh, copy and paste and
Thank you.
have your own policy ready to go. Yeah, thank you for volunteering.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Catherine. Awesome. Okay, so we are going to get into some templates now for that you can use. Again, you can definitely fill out this worksheet. It's a great place to start. You can check out pointers, much more in-depth template as well. But we also have some things that are ready to use. You could fill them out today and maybe have them on your website, get them vetted, and have them on your website tomorrow. We would love to see it. So Lynn, go ahead with that. Yeah, trusting news as sample language.
Yeah, so again, the worksheet is something that is there for that AI use policy, but we talked about how you also need those AI use disclosures. And so if you go to the next slide, I think, Laura, we have what is basically a fill in the blank Mad Lib. We have a fill in the blank style template that you can use. Yep, right here. No, that's actually, is that? No. Yes, that is,
This one,
that's it.
This one's
So,
the story level one.
yes, thank you. Sorry, that's the story level disclosure template. I was like, that doesn't look quite right. So basically where you see the bold is where you would fill in what you're using. This is, again, would go top of story. We've seen newsrooms put it at the top of the story, the bottom of the story, the middle of the story. We've also seen, I know this is something USA Today does, where it's like a clickable icon where like people get more information. It'll say like AI summary, or this was produced with the assistance of AI. You click on the little information icon and then a bigger, longer explanation pops up. But the idea here is that all the information that the public said that they wanted fits into this fill in the blank template. And then Laura, sorry, do you mind going back 2 slides? Because that's where we have the, yes, here. So we also have, yes, that's it. So we also have a whole web post of all of the sample language that you can literally use to put into those templates. So I know, Catherine, when we were talking, you talked about translation. We have sample language on our website specifically about how you can talk about translation and why you use it. We talk about how you can explain why you use it for efficiency, why you use it to help you do more. And all of that language that we have that's available, copy and paste it, fill it in. It's all been also tested with audiences. So this is language that they reacted most favorably to.
And okay, so we talked about getting like a general policy on your website, putting it somewhere where, you know, on an existing page, maybe your about page, creating your own page for it. But importantly, make it easy for people to find if they come to your website and they just want to know a little bit about what you're doing with AI. That's what this one is for. So it's basically a shortened version of some of the other exercises and templates we've done. So, you know, all you have to do is kind of fill in some of these, fill in the blanks here, or the parentheses or brackets. That's the word I'm looking for. And obviously you can adapt it to your needs, like the language in between. But the important things are that you're, again, stating your reason and you're being specific about tasks that you will use it for and tasks that you won't use it for. And if you can engage your audience on this question, we think that's great because, you know, we came up earlier, we're giving you some aggregate data about what audiences think, but we'd also love to see newsrooms talking specifically about this to their audience. So if you have a form they can fill out or something like that, again, make it quick, make it easy. Link to that. But also, if you don't, and it's too much to get that done, just, you know, delete the last part of the sentence. Just get it out there. And
yeah, and the reason, sorry, Laura, just to kind of put a like exclamation point, do this on that point, is that when we have done research, we have found that when newsrooms were using those in-story disclosures, right? The newsrooms that included a link to their AI use policy and saying like learn more, people reacted to those disclosures more positively. So again, just like having that policy is step one. It can be short, it can be sweet, but that is step one. That is just going to be, from an audience perspective, make them more comfortable with your use of AI, which we should be working toward to make them still want to consume our content and believe what we are sharing with them.
Yeah, and okay, so if you're not using AI, we talked earlier about the No AI policy builder as well, getting that out there. And this slide is just a long way of saying, say it, share it, tell people you're for humans by humans. Again, the aggregate data that we look at shows that there's a big appetite for that. So if you're doing it, like I think Lynn made such a good point earlier, if you're working so hard I know everybody is working hard, whether you're using AI or not, to make credible content, but if you're doing it all human built, like put it out there and get credit for it. Okay, and then this is our the template that we have live on the web on the policy builder. This is the full template. It has kind of two parts to it. One is just the most straightforward one, and then if you want to, you can so the first couple of sentences that starts with or that ends with reason tied to your mission is the first part of the policy builder. On the policy builder, the first piece you're going to see. The full expanded one, if you want to expand that in the builder, you can also, we really recommend highlighting and this, by the way, some of these things go for everybody when you're using, whether you're using AI or not, but really highlighting your expertise, describe your processes, and note, how your work is improving your audience's lives. And again, just to my point earlier, say it and say it a lot. You feel free to, just because you're not using AI doesn't mean you can't, again, get credit for it on the story level. So you can have this general policy, but you can also put a reminder at the bottom of your stories, like, hey, just a reminder, human produced, fully human produced content. And again, feel free to mix and match these. I think something Catherine really pointed out is the importance of, that all the content is human written. So I personally see nothing wrong with a reminder, even if you are using AI in other parts of the process. You just need to be really specific about those disclosures. All right, and now I was just reading a question in the chat, but perfect, we're on to the question portion, so we love it.
Amazing. I was actually gonna read that out loud. Do you want me to go ahead?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Laura? So Jamie asks, does your research show that there is any risk in disclosing that you don't use AI in a common way, but then as things evolve, you decide to in fact use it in a way and disclose it then? Felt tricky to navigate, they say.
And Laura, I can talk a little bit about what we found with the disclosure research very briefly. And so I put a link in here that has, it's a link to a trust kit that has all of those resources I mentioned, but it also has a link to the research post that dives deeper into what we found, basically how news consumers reacted to seeing in-story disclosures. What we did see, and I will say unfortunately, because people say they want transparency, 98% of people are saying tell us. And when you really dive deep into when they want it, they pretty much want it all the time. So we worked with newsrooms to do that, to give them that transparency. And unfortunately, what we did see is that did lead to some loss of trust in the content when they saw that AI was used. Now, the percentage of loss and the likelihood of someone to lose trust did depend a lot on each newsroom. So we had newsrooms in the cohort that were based in the US. We had newsrooms based in Switzerland. We had newsrooms based in Brazil. The newsrooms, the international newsrooms, the non-US newsrooms, they saw less of a decrease or no decrease in trust with those disclosures. So I think that's one thing, is to also understand your audience. So even though we saw that slight decrease in trust, we still believe it is the right thing to do, because we think that not disclosing would be even worse. We've seen the backlash that's popped up with a couple incidents over the years when people haven't disclosed. And so I guess to kind of answer, Jamie, your question, if you say that you aren't using AI, but that changes, I think that's totally fine. I think, though, you have to frame how you're talking about AI in a conversational way and be willing to update your audience regularly about those changes. So say, if you have a change and you are using it, it's probably worth more than just adding a disclosure, especially if you have a policy sitting out there saying that you don't use it, and all of a sudden you have one story where you do. I would then make kind of a big deal of saying, you know, hey, we now are experimenting with AI use, and here's why. It could be a letter from the publisher, it could be a letter from the editor, it could be something that you do in a newsletter, it could be a story on the website. But I think if you approach it that way, as this is an experimental process that we are still experimenting with and trying, and here's why, but we're going to update you along the way, and then you do update, I think that will be okay.
I see another question here from Joanna. She says, what are your thoughts on higher education press rooms and whether there is value in having, sorry, it moves, in having a publicly written policy?
I'll happily take that one as an educator myself. So this semester, the short answer is yes. I think that there is a lot of value, and I want to emphasize that it's value not only for the potential audience of the newsroom, but also in the pedagogical process of having them build it. So one thing I did with this was not a student newsroom, but it was my class this semester. I actually had one of the first assignments was for us to build an AI policy for our class together. And so we're getting the students thinking critically about where this fits in or not to their workflow, and also their learning process. Like, there were some things that the students didn't want to use AI for that are kind of common uses in newsrooms nowadays, because they saw that as hurting their ability to learn those skills. So I think that's a great conversation, and something that you can replicate in the student newsroom environment as well.
Another question from Francis. If you don't know how AI found the info, what does human oversight look at in terms of fact checking? How do you know if AI did it right if you don't know how AI did it?
So this is kind of like one of the I think big ethical questions around using AI. Is there's so much that we don't know about how the processes works, where information is coming from. It's not like Wikipedia where things are sourced right, or like if you went to a website, you can actually look at a document. So I think that is kind of a bigger ethical question in the newsroom, and to have, and a discussion to have, and to see like what is your comfort level with that not knowing. Now, just because you don't know where the information comes from doesn't mean that you can't fact check it, right? You still have the ability, like you would with any source. If someone came to you and did an interview and told you XYZ, you're going to go fact check it, right? So you still could fact check it in that way. But there is still that ethical issue, I think, around like, are we okay that we're actually not sure where this pulled from? And it could have literally pulled from another news organization and we don't know. So that's the ethical issue. But I think the responsible human verifying thing is still possible. You treat it just you would like any other source of information. You're going to go fact check like you would normally.
I think tip sheet is a good phrase to keep in mind when it comes to things like this. Oh, you're muted, Valeria.
Thank you. Another question from Natalie. She says, any suggestions on the process newsrooms should use to create these policies, disclosures, and especially who should be involved? Her newsroom recently made an AI committee, but she's not on it. So she says they don't have a clear process for drafting, editing that policy.
Yeah, so some of the newsrooms that I've seen do this the best do kind of, before creating the policy, they do recruit people, like it sounds like you have done in your newsroom, to be on a committee that kind of is like, they are the people that are going to kind of sign off and do most of the work on this. But make sure that people on that committee represent different areas of the newsroom, different perspectives, people who are using it and not using it, right? That kind of diversity of perspective is really important. Also, it's important to set up like, how can others in the newsroom get in touch with this committee, right? Like if they have new ideas, like what is that process? Establishing basically like who these people are, what they're doing, and how to get in touch with them is really important. And then I would say also saying, you know, we're going to look at our policy probably at least annually, maybe depending on how much you're using AI, every 6 months. And I actually answered this question in the Q&A. Someone said like, what specific elements of the policy would be the most important to look to update? And the two I think that are the most important is if you mention anywhere how you're currently using AI, make sure that is always like up to date. Or if you have a section where you say how we are not using AI, those would be two areas that I would pay attention to the most.